Well, I want to start off with a question. As a nonprofit leader, if you could have one operational fix tomorrow that would immediately free capacity for you to focus on relationships, what could that be? And maybe you've pondered that. Boy, if I could free some things up so I could do more with the people that really count, I wish I could find that time. Well, we're going to talk about that today. And this is the Funding the Future Now podcast. My name is Dr. Randy Dirks. I've been in the development world for 28 years, so I know what it is like to be in the trenches working with three nonprofits. And the purpose of this podcast is really primarily designed for people in the nonprofit world, although people from other sectors can certainly benefit from a variety of topics we'll discuss. But it's designed to give practical insights so you could take what you hear today and apply it in the afternoon or tomorrow to your nonprofit. We want to make it as personable and as practical as possible. Well, I've got a very interesting guest with us here today because of the kind of work she does, Dena Vongchang, and she is the founder of Good Soup. First of all, I love a good soup. So that's just a great title for her organization. It's a fundraising operations agency for nonprofit teams. So Dina helps with the work that we could say is underneath the work, the CRM management, data hygiene, workflow builds, stewardship processes, and the fixes that we need so often just to keep the pipeline moving of the things that are most important for us. So Dina, what a delight to have you as a guest today. You bring such a unique background with you. And so why don't you just take a few moments and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me on, Randy. I'm super excited to be here. Like Randy mentioned, my name is Dena Vongchang, founder of Good Soup, and I started my career in fundraising. I started in as a development associate, worked on grants, fundraising, major gifts. Everything you name it in fundraising, I did it. Also did some marketing, but at every single organization I was at, I was big into using the CRM, optimizing it for my colleagues, my boss, and just making it having a goal of making it one source of truth. And so at every organization I was with, that was one of my biggest priorities and one of my biggest passions. So when I decided to go off on my own, to start my own agency, I really wanted to focus on fundraising operations and bringing my expertise as a frontline fundraiser, like many of the people that I've worked with, to the technical operations sides of fundraising operations. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Well, you know what? As you were talking, it just came to my memory because obviously where I work, we have our CRM. And I think sometimes a bit of a problem for fundraising executives and leaders of nonprofits. You see some, we'll just say some positive signs that are out there, and you make the assumption everything is working well underneath the hood. But I think when you get underneath the hood, so to speak, and get into the CRM and begin to analyze a whole host of data points, you probably would begin to realize we have a glitch. We have a problem with maybe a program, maybe the things that we could do better. And so your CRM is so much more than simply a house where you store names and addresses. It is an important research tool for us, and so grateful that we can have you on the podcast today. So, what would you say is the most important thing that you see fundraising teams quietly losing money on? Not because they lack talent. Obviously, we're in this because we want to do well, we have passion, but because a system or a process is broken underneath, as we called it, the hood.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing would be lapsed donors. And I know I've seen organizations do this in a lot of different ways. They either pull a report when they're ready to run a campaign, or they decide, okay, we need to figure out how to find additional money. Let's look at our lapsed donors. But in reality, and I know a lot of fundraisers are wanting to think about these things consistently, they just don't have the time. And so, how do we think about building systems to keep ourselves accountable and also have it top of mind? So, we're not just thinking about it when it comes up or when we need to, but it's just always there. And so I think one thing that I would recommend every organization to prioritize is having a system that identifies lapsed donors at least within 90 days. So you can just as week to week execute on those conversations. So reaching out, checking in on donors before they go completely lapse. And so, yeah, I think just having a report that identifies those people well ahead so you can start chipping away at contacting those individuals and build and maintaining those relationships. And I think that's one of the biggest things that can keep you ahead of lapsed donors, rather than being yeah, delayed on on the follow up.
Yeah. You raised, Dina, such a great point. I know from my own research that I've done that to gain a donor takes obviously a lot of effort. If you lose that donor, in other words, if that donor lapses, not that you've totally lost them, they're just not continuing to give, and you then invest money to gain a new donor rather than re-engage that lapsed donor, you're going to spend more money to gain a new donor. So to have that data point of how many people lapsed and then to find a system that helps to reactivate. Now, that may point out that you were not doing very good donor work to begin with, and that's another whole question to address. So thank you for raising that point. I don't think we would have thought that lapsed donors was the most important thing to fix, but I can see how it truly is.
Randy, can I say one thing?
Yeah,
Sorry.
please jump
I
in.
think just, you don't wanna get them at lapse. You don't want them to get them as they're lapsing, but you wanna definitely get them ahead. So I
Yeah,
would say the 90-day touch point is the minimum, but if you can reach them be way well beyond, like, that 90 days, that's even better. So having this report to just keep you accountable about, "Hey, this person is coming up, maybe close to their 90 days, let's reach
okay.
out to them. Let's check in and see how they're doing."
Yes.
That just allows you to stay accountable for who, you should be prioritizing in your outreach. And so I wouldn't
Mm,
say, like, have a lapsed donor list.
yeah,
You should
yeah,
have that too for sure, but staying ahead of that too is
yeah.
the priority.
That's valuable point. Thank you for adding that
Yeah, of
in,
course.
which means that you're always looking at that 90-day window, probably on a regular reporting sheet that comes out, and you're in a way, you're just saying, how can we be more sensitive to these time frames and not wait until my point earlier, you really, in essence, if you go past that 90 days, now you're getting to the point of losing that donor.
Exactly. Yep.
So thank you for making that
Of
clarification.
course.
Well, when a development director is splitting, let's say, his or her energy between raising funds and managing a CRM, managing the operational side there, which one actually suffers more and why does it matter in the long term?
Yeah, I think in the long term, when you're trying to balance both, your relationships, I think, impact the most in the long term because you should be spending. I mean, I want to make it clear that, development directors, leaders, and any fundraisers should be in the CRM day to day,
Yes.
but it shouldn't take a huge chunk of their time. And
Mhm.
so, I think it's important that you either have someone who's dedicated to kind of help maintain the systems, whether that be a development operations manager, development director, or development operations director, but someone dedicated to maintaining the systems because there's a lot of things that come in that the development director doesn't have time to do because they're being pulled in multiple directions. They have
Yes.
meetings with leadership, meetings with donors, and maybe even managing a team. So if they're trying to maintain the CRM at the same time, it's probably not getting enough attention, or the attention it deserves. So things start falling through the cracks on the CRM, which then impact the relationships on long term.
Yeah, I appreciate that response. You said people need to be in the CRM daily. That doesn't mean hours. That could mean 15 minutes at the
Hmm.
start of the day, but you're seeing regular systems. And if you have a dedicated person, even in some small shops, if it's a part-time individual, and if they can be feeding you those reports that are coming in a consistent way, then that maybe jogs your memory. Oh, I want to check in on Bob and Sally because that maybe came up in a report, then you can start seeing, okay, they made a gift of X 3 months ago for this particular project. That is something they're interested in. So now your data really starts informing the kinds of conversations you can have with people. If somebody has 60 or 70 or 150 people they're working with, they can't keep all that information in their underneath the hood, so to
Exactly.
speak. And so that was great. I appreciate that. Well, if you could handle or hand a nonprofit fundraising team one operational fix that would immediately free up their capacity to focus on relationships. So to say, hey, if you guys do this, an operational side, it's going to allow you much more capacity to build those relationships, to cultivate them, and to see people valued. What would you say that operational fix would be?
Yeah, Randy, this was such a good question. And I had to really think about this one because, as you know, as a DevOps person, like there's a million and one things you can fix. But
Yeah, yeah.
I really had to like sit with this one and think. So thank you for that. And I came down to, I think, stop recreating things from scratch. So
Mm. Good.
a lot of fundraising teams I've worked with, there's always like a new report that we need to make or a different acknowledgments. And you should be doing all these things. But I think it's super important to create templates that you can reuse and recreate. And so a lot of databases, sometimes we have reports that are specified but for specific dates. But what if we used a field that updated automatically, like fiscal year or and calendar year? And so that report constantly updates when the fiscal year changes or the calendar year changes. So then you're not having to recreate and build a report from scratch each time.
Sure.
And that helps you save hours from, when you have to create board reports or any funder reports and things like that. So that would be one. And then any additional templates too. So thank yous, personalized thank yous that go out. I think it's still super important to personalize the emails, but if you have a template ready to go, at least you have somewhere
Mhm.
to start. Cause I think sometimes that's the hardest part. Where do I start with my thank you? And having a template with the critical information, whether that be an annual report or a story that you recently received from the marketing and communications team that you can
Mhm.
reshare, that makes it so much easier, I think, and saves the team a lot of time. And that can be shared across the team as well, so that we're sharing resources as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the matter of being able to streamline something so you're not recreating things and constantly saying, "Oh, what went into that document and how did we structure the report?" And
Exactly.
so that is so important, and I love the idea. It's almost for me, I'm gonna gonna show something. I know the audio won't come up, but I've got my pen here and I'm lifting something up. That's the leverage. It enables me with very little leverage, I can lift a lot of weight. So if I can leverage things that I'm doing in my organization, the reporting, the structuring, it's just gonna do so many good things all around for people. That's great. Well, here's another question. A lot of fundraising teams invest in strategy, which I was just talking with my president today, and we're talking about our 3-year strategy. So it's always top of mind. What is a strategy? The board wants to know what are the plans, what are coming up, and but in doing that, they maybe underinvest in fundraising operations. Now, you've been on that side. You've really seen both worlds. But what's the real cost of a gap when it comes to donor retention and pipeline momentum when there is this imbalance between maybe the focus on the strategy and minimizing the operations? What does that end up costing?
Yeah, I think at first, it's invisible. The cost is invisible until it's not. And that's when it can get really dangerous because nobody's looking at the year-end numbers and saying we lost that donor because things weren't configured right. But in reality, it's things like what I was talking about earlier, where we didn't follow up in time. Maybe they found another organization that they could invest their time and energy and money into because we didn't reach out or we didn't engage. So those little operational systems that don't currently exist could be costing you money long term
Mhm.
because there's no systems to help alleviate some of those things that fall through the cracks. And so, yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing. So there's like little things that happen over time, like the follow up that doesn't happen after a certain amount, after 6 weeks or so, because people didn't enter the gifts right away, or gifts take longer to process because you didn't document it. And so things pile up. And I think that eventually impacts the strategy because strategy is only what you can, like, you actually apply to. And you can be doing everything right. But if the systems aren't setting you up for success and documenting next steps, and also carrying previous information from major or donor meetings and things like that, then that can really cost the team.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what it's gonna do? It's gonna cost the team momentum
Yes,
where they could have had something more effective and they didn't. Yeah.
exactly. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, no, I hear you totally, totally. So let me just makes a couple points here. I know one area that I'm learning more and more about, we could say if there's a triangle of donors at the top are people that are obviously giving more money. It's a smaller amount at the top of the triangle. You get to the middle of the triangle, we call them mid-range donors, and that's a larger number. But you get to the bottom of the triangle, and that's the largest amount of donors number-wise. They're giving smaller gifts. But my point would be this. If we knew that those people at that bottom level, which are really the foundational gifts, if there was somebody that was giving a gift $25 a month for 7 years in a row, that begins to tell us so much about that person. Number one, they're loyal to the organization, they're consistent in their giving, and they like us. Now,
Exactly.
that's what now strategy doesn't reveal that.
Yep.
Strategy is at a different level. It would maybe be saying we need more major donors, but getting into the operational side, you learn something about that person. And one thing that I'm becoming more aware of is that people that give consistently i- over a long period of time, they're the ones that are likely interested in what we would call a planned gift to your organization. Doesn't necessarily need to be the $100,000 giver. It could be that $25 a month donor that is very loyal. So I love your point, the difference between strategy and operations.
Yeah, and Randy, one more thing I would add on to that. Exactly. Everything you said. And on top of that, and I think with pipeline momentum is the same story. So if you can have the best prospect list in the world, but if your team can't see what stage each prospect is in, if follow-ups aren't tracked, if there's no shared view of what's been asked and what's pending, your pipeline isn't a pipeline. It's a list
Sure.
of names and lists that don't close gifts. So I think that's where systems can really come into play with showing the reality of where everything is at. And so complementing the strategy that you have in place. So the real cost is of the gap isn't just, the number, but it's a compound effect of hundreds of small moments where the ball got dropped, not because your team isn't talented or teams aren't talented,
Sure.
but because there was nothing underneath them to catch it.
Yeah, I love it. So well put. Well, I've got a few what I call fast five questions at
Yeah.
the end, and these don't have anything to do with the CRM, but they deal more with just you as a person. So here's the first question. What would you say is maybe the best or a great piece of a professional advice you've received?
I think in my situation specifically, it was to join, for me at least, a organization, a professional organization. In my case, I joined AFP when I first started.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Randy.
No, no, I'm familiar
Okay.
with it. I love what
Okay.
they
Yeah. And so I was encouraged to join and I was, eager to just be a part of something and learn and grow. But I think what really made it more impactful was I engaged and I tried to participate in as much as I could and learn from my peers and my mentors. And so AFP, like the encouragement to join AFP was, I'd say, probably one of the best advice I've gotten
Yeah,
because I also engaged as much as I could and really got a lot out of it. Networking, education, and friends out of everything. Yeah.
super. That's great. Here's the next question. What's a daily habit you just cannot live without?
I think it would be going on walks with my dog and my fiance. Like mentioned earlier, we live in the mountains, so we get to go on these nice strolls with big redwood trees. And I think that really helps with my mental health and gets away from the screen because, as you imagine, I'm on the screen all day. So that helps a lot.
The next question is, imagine if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, that young, aspiring young lady, and you could give some advice, knowing what you know now. What would you share with your younger self?
Yeah, I think my younger self was very unsure, like many early 20-year-olds are. And so I would probably go back and just say everything works out. Just keep showing up as your best self and believing in yourself, and the rest will fall into place. Because it sure did.
Yeah, that's good. Good advice. The next question is, I want you to think of a failure. It doesn't need to be massive by any means, but maybe something you wish, oh, I wish I could have changed that. But I want you to think of the other side. What did that situation actually set you up for success in your life?
Yeah, I think it was when I first met up with or started working with major donors more because I live in an area where, there's a lot of wealthy people. I mean, there's a lot of
Mhm.
wealthy people in a lot of areas, but I think my first exposure to wealthy people and meeting with them one on one. And so I think when I first met with a few more people, I started to have imposter syndrome. Like, why would these people want to talk to me? And so
Okay.
sometimes I wouldn't, have like I wouldn't I feel afraid to make the ask. And so
Yeah.
this I think relates to me a lot now because from there I learned that they're just human too. They're just wanting to connect and make an
Sure.
impact. And that's why they want to meet with you and that's why they want to engage with you. And so I think that situation really helped me understand who I am as a person and also better engage with all types of people, no matter what socioeconomic class they are from. And so in the long term, I think it helped me realize who I am as a person, but also how I interact with all types of people.
Okay.
So coming at it as we're all just human. And this helps me in all aspects of my work when it comes to meeting with new nonprofits or even working with nonprofits and helping them get through their fears of working with major donors or funders and things like that. And so I think that moment in itself has helped me a lot in all aspects of my work
For
and in
sure.
my life. Yeah.
Just love that. Wonderful you had, yet you've grown and developed in areas that you mentioned, and obviously being a part of the AFP and getting out and building connections, building relationships. Those certainly help to move you and develop you. Well, here's the last question: where's maybe your favorite place on earth to disconnect and recharge? I think I maybe know where that is, but you go ahead and share it.
I wanted to change this one up a little bit. I think one additional place that we like to go to is there's a beach about 30 minutes away from us, and we
Yeah.
like to go tide pooling. So looking at the little creatures in the tide pools.
Oh,
But
yeah.
while we're doing that so it's, like, really cool to see kind of, a little world in a little pond, that just happens because the ocean decides it wants to go over some holes, and so
Yeah.
it just really puts things into perspective, and while
Mm,
you're out there, you see how vast the ocean is, and you see the
yes.
sea life that's out there, and so I think that really helps me disconnect 'cause I don't wanna be on my phone. I just wanna be in that place, and so, yeah, that would probably be my favorite place nearby to disconnect and recharge.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You've given 2 examples. You like to daily get out into the woods, and then you like the water. And, that those 2 places, I think, are probably the 2 main places for most people get refreshed. It's just the nature and the water and the ocean. So, well, wonderful. Well, what a delight, Dina, it's been to have you on the podcast. You're bringing something that normally we don't talk about, but is so critical and essential to the well-being, the financial health, but also the team well-being of nonprofits. So thanks for being with us. So why don't you just take a few moments and share a little bit more about Good Soup and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, I think the best place you can either follow me on LinkedIn, search me up, Dina Vongchang. I post weekly tips, thoughts, ideas,
Mm,
or you can go on my website and check me out there. I also have a blog and Instagram as well where you can find everything on my website. A good suit. So check it out.
Great. Love it. Well, thank you again, Dina, for being on the podcast, and just grateful for that. And to the audience, just to let you know that these kind of podcasts, whether it be on Apple or Spotify or YouTube, get delivered a couple times a week. And we'd love for you to join in. Again, the purpose is to give practical, usable ideas, guidance, tips for our nonprofit world, which can be extremely rewarding and also at times very challenging. So again, my name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and we welcome you back in the future. Bye for now.